The Tears of God. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This book continues the story of the Arab sugar daddy and the beautiful Indian girl, and the story of the Indian child bride and the old Arab husband, and the story of the Indian Miss World and the rage of Muslims of the world, and also the story of Christina and the complete Jew. They have been written in English and translated into Arabic by the author Dr. Ahmed. This tale resonates with genuine love, strong resilience, and steadfast courage. I invite you to accompany me as I narrate the adventures of the extremely beautiful Indian girl, Aphrodite Khan, and her handsome American lover, Michael Lewinsky, in the Muslim world. Before we dive in the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader this novel is narrated in 6 books. Book 1, The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. Book 2, The Indian Child Bride and the Old Arab Husband. Book 3, The Indian Miss World and the Rage of Muslims of the World. Book 4, Christina and the Complete Jew. Book 5, The Tears of God, Jews, Blacks, and Muslim Women. And Book 6, The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. This is an intriguing epic story which exhibits resilience, love, and sacrifice. Book 5. Researching the social life of the Muslim woman in the Islamic world. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from a review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictional, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is merely coincidental. Chapter 42. A Moonless Night in the Black Continent. As the frantic search for them wound its way through every nook and corner of Mujlad town, Malik and Malika enjoyed a fitfully peaceful trip by bus. Women had offered their bodies to be tortured, raped, and brutally killed, while men had endured cruel flogging to purchase their safe escape. The American couple, Michael and Christina, are unfortunately blissfully unaware that their relative safety had been bought and paid for with a heavy price. Under advisement from Dr. Kukutia, the couple risked overland travel by way of local transportation from Mujlad town to the border of the Democratic Republic of South Sudan. As their benevolent, late sister Catherine had advised, the couple disembarked from the bus at a small village near the outskirts of Abyei city. The late sister Patricia had explained that the city is completely deserted, much like the Syrian city of Kobani, where the ISIS terrorists and the Kurdish Peshmerga fighters battled each other from street to street and lane to lane. More than 300,000 Kurdish people fled their city, leaving it to the demons of the Islamic Caliphate. Likewise, in the Abyei, the southern troops and the northern Mujahideen are battling like hungry dogs fighting over a bone. The 2 American jail escapees decided to avoid it completely. Michael and Christina were told by the late Sudanese nun Patricia Akal that they would be in a safe land the moment they reached South Sudanese soil. They were promised that the country they were fleeing would be a secular country with all the freedoms and security of Western countries. As she claimed, the people of that land had put religious differences behind them and embraced secularism. It is a land that separated the state from religion, gave women equal rights, and recognized all people as equal regardless of their race, color, gender, and religion. First of all, we must state what people mean by the term secular country. Simply put, they mean the people of that country don't want God to rule their lives nor follow laws drawn from the Holy Bible, preferring otherwise to follow man-made systems such as democracy, human rights, sexual freedom, living together without marriage, gay marriage, right to abortion. Children are to be raised by the government and not the parents. Children will not take care of their parents when they grow old, but to be sent to a home care so that someone else will take care of them. No need to go to church or believe in God anymore. No religion to be taught at school. The Lord Prayer is not allowed to be recited by schoolchildren anymore. The 10 Commandments have been removed from every courtroom of law, and no verses of the Bible to be displayed in any government building. Many of the churches in Europe are deserted, only to be sold in auctions to be bought by Muslims who convert them into mosques. The Catholic churches, Eastern Orthodox churches, Egyptian Coptic churches, and Syrian churches, all exalted the Virgin Mary and made her co-redemptive with Christ. Today, most Protestant churches established during and after the Reformation are as good as dead, the Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, Anglican, and Baptist churches included. After the so-called Enlightenment, Europe forsook God and invented every kind of worldly man-made system, such as secularism, Darwinism, also called evolutionism, communism, atheism, nihilism, Nazism, liberalism, Freudianism, deism, humanism, existentialism, postmodernism, feminism, and pantheism. America remained 200 years behind the atheism of Europe and continues to believe in God. It had 3 great religious awakenings or revivals. In any case, Christina is still very weak, and her body has not yet fully recovered. The American husband Michael was not keen on moving his ailing Indian wife from the relative safety and loving care of the 2 compassionate Catholic nuns, but their presence posed imminent danger to the 2 Christian sisters. He agreed to take the risk and move on. As soon as Christina completed her course of medication and was declared fit enough to travel by the Nubian doctor, the couple left the charity home and began their exodus to freedom. They are left late afternoon on the same day the Muslim terrorists, who are headed by the devil incarnate Khalid Mansour al-Had, invaded the peaceful town, turning it upside down, in much the same way as their ISIS counterparts, who similarly invaded Christian towns in Syria and Iraq to capture its inhabitants, staying until they had quenched their killing spree. When they beheaded 21 innocent Coptic Christians on a beach in Libya and posted their barbaric slaughter on the internet for the entire world to see, they announced that it was to avenge the blood of Osama bin Laden, who got killed by the Western Crusaders. When the evil Londoner, Jihadi John, who beheaded many innocent Westerners, is now known by his true identity as Muhammad Amazi and originally from Kuwait, his former neighbors, friends, school classmates, work colleagues, and his boss praised his moral behavior as an angel in human form. They might have almost nominated him for the coming Nobel Peace Prize. They made him out as an innocent lamb that was brainwashed by ISIS and turned from a good British citizen into a jihadi monster. No one is ready to speak the truth and say he is the product of his religious upbringing, and hence he is a true Muslim who sincerely follows the teachings of his Quran and the Sunnah of his Prophet. The 3 British teenage girls who fled from London, traveled through Turkey to Syria, and joined the newly founded Islamic Caliphate, are also considered to be victims of ISIS propaganda and not true followers of Islam. In retrospect, ISIS terrorists beheaded their victims. Prophet Muhammad beheaded his victims, 900 Jews, in one single day. The ISIS Mujahideen burned their victims and buried some of them alive, and Muhammad killed his victims in even more cruel ways when he cut their hands and legs off and pierced their eyes with burning rods, leaving them to die slowly on the hot sands. All the so-called for rightly guided caliphs of Islam, Abu Bakr, Omar, Osman, and Ali, had burned their righteousness through a swath of war prisoners and gay people. At least, so far, the demons of the newly founded Islamic Caliphate have not burnt gay people. In recent videos posted on the internet, the ISIS religious judges tossed 5 gay people down from the highest building in Mosul city. When their bodies hit the ground, an angry mob of hundreds of Muslim men, women, and children stoned them to death, since some were still alive, and in other cases, just to make sure they stayed dead. As usual, the Muslim apologists will tell you that this is most probably the act of Muslims who follow a twisted version of Islamism and terrorism. As they always falsely say, terrorism has no religion. They forget that in a hadith, the Prophet Muhammad commanded that the gay people who practice sodomy are to be thrown to their deaths from the highest place. When the 2 French Muslim brothers stormed the Charlie Hebdo magazine office and murdered the cartoonists who criticized the Prophet Muhammad, many Muslims condemned them and considered their actions as un-Islamic. They forgot to refer to the cruel murder of the woman Asma bint Marwan, who wrote a few verses of poetry and criticized Muhammad for murdering his relatives after they surrendered to him in the Battle of Badr. Why the acts of the two French Muslim citizens who born in Paris to Algerian immigrants were wrong and un-Islamic, and what the Prophet Muhammad did to the woman Asma bint Marwan who criticized him was right and religiously justified. Every Muslim terrorist is innocent until proven guilty through his terrorist action. I have received many life threats from a Muslim terrorist who lives a couple of blocks away from my apartment. When I reported him to the Canadian RCMP, I was told that internet recordings cannot be accepted as evidence in a Canadian court of law. I then had been told to call 911 if I saw him standing near my apartment, or if he tried to attack me while I was in my car or public. Even then I was advised of the need for credible witnesses. In other words, unless he kills me, I have no legal ground to sue him. That means he is an innocent lamb like Jihadi John, and until proven to be guilty by killing me or boarding a plane bound for Turkey to join ISIS. If the American couple, Michael and Christina, had delayed their trip by a couple of hours, they would have been dead and gone. The son of the devil, Khalid Mansour, would not have hesitated for a second to shoot them and shoot those nuns who sheltered them for 7 days. Although they had managed to escape the clutches of death, the couple could hardly know the amount of devastation and human causalities that they left behind them. If they had foreseen what had befallen those who helped them to escape, they would have remained behind and offered their lives for the sake of saving the lives of those 2 innocent nuns and sparing the honor of the 12-year-old daughter. She was the underage virgin daughter of the good old man who brought them to the safety of the Christian charity home. Once again, Michael and Christina used the cover of night, left the small village at dusk time, and resumed their risky journey, this time walking on foot. The village is located exactly on the borderline between the two countries, the country of the accursed black Arabs and the African country of the Southerners. They began their walk immediately after the sunset, and depended for some time on the twilight to find their way. As soon as dusk faded away, they found themselves cloaked in the pitch-black darkness of the African night. Many people believe that Africa is called the Black Continent because of its black inhabitants. That is a totally mistaken belief. A visitor to that old continent will soon discard that erroneous belief when he experiences his first moonless night. Even the earth of that continent is black. So, in my humble opinion, only God knows why everything in Africa is black and dark, and that includes the minds of most of its people. Among all the 7 billion human beings in the world, Africans are the most superstitious, backward, and deeply involved in black magic and animism, which is the worship of Satan. Africa has the highest illiteracy rate in the world. Epidemic diseases kill every year thousands of Africans. Ebola claims the lives of thousands and spread like fire throughout the whole continent. Likewise, coronavirus is spreading all over the black continent. Oh my God, have mercy on Africa. Some people in the past used the Bible to connect Africans with slavery or relate them to the devil. Some silly Christian preachers even preached in their churches that black people are the children of the devil. The Bible has never said the devil is black. He is called the power of darkness, Colossians chapter 1, verses 13 to 14, which means spiritual darkness. On the contrary, Satan transforms himself as an angel of light. See 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. Therefore, he is the most beautiful being that has ever been created by God. We can read his description in Ezekiel 28, verses 12 to 15. He has not been described as ugly or black in color. If he can transform himself as an angel of light, then the black Africans will be the last people to resemble him in color or look. Besides that, Satan is a fallen angel, and that is why he and his angels are called evil spirits or unclean spirits. Therefore, neither he nor his demons are the physical embodiment of humans. Under the influences of anti-Semitism and the teachings of Friedrich Nietzsche, such as the supermind, his blasphemous statement God is dead, and the satanic doctrine of nihilism, Adolf Hitler believed that the Jews and black people did not deserve to live, and he attempted to annihilate them. He decided first to destroy the Jews of Europe, and then marched to the Black Continent to decimate the Africans. When Hitler heard that a black man was appointed as the first medical doctor in America, he was reported to have wondered how a virus could treat another virus. For him, the black man was just a virus that needed to be destroyed. Some Europeans were influenced by the theory of evolution, which taught that nature is trying to get rid of the weak and the sick, and coined some phrases such as natural selection and survival for the fittest. They said that, let the weak and sick and poor die. Consequently, the moral virtues of kindness and mercy were discarded and replaced by the so-called greatest virtue of terror, and the result was the death of 75 million people during World War I and World War II, and the horrific Nazi Holocaust where 6 million Jews had been brutally gassed and killed. Mark Twain became an atheist because he heard slavery being preached from the pulpit. Many Christians used the curse of Noah to his grandson Canaan in Genesis 9, verse 25, and justified the slavery of the black Africans because they are the descendants of Ham. See the table of nations in Genesis chapter 10. First of all, Noah cursed his grandson Canaan, and not his son Ham. Africans are Hamites through the other sons of Ham, Cush, Put, and Mizraim, Genesis, chapter 10, verse 6. The descendants of Canaan were the 7 tribes known as the Canaanites who used to dwell in present-day Israel. There are many more Hamites besides the Africans. For example, the Hamitic peoples included the Egyptians, Chinese, Japanese, Mongols, Koreans, and Native Americans. Secondly, the Bible states that the Israelites were used by God to punish the Canaanites for their abominable practices, which led the land to vomit them out. See Leviticus chapter 18, verse 30 and Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 9 to 11. God destroyed 7 Canaanite nations and gave their land to the children of Israel as an everlasting inheritance, present-day Israel, Acts chapter 13, verse 19. The land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. It was given to them by God, established to them by God, held in trust for them by God, and when they were driven out of it, restored to them by God, and decreed by God to be their homeland forever. No power on earth can uproot them out of their promised land again. Chapter 43. The Black Israelites. Before we drop the matter of Africa, there is something worth mentioning. Some African Americans claim to be the true Israelites, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but somehow their identities as the true Hebrew Israelites were stolen from them by today's Jews who live in Israel. This conspiracy theory may sound unbelievable to any serious student of history or biblical scholar. However, the African Americans, including professors and highly educated students, take it seriously and publish their conspiracy theories on the internet and whatever available media. According to them, the present Jews are the descendants of the inhabitants of the Khazar Empire, which flourished during the 8th century. In the year 740 AD, their king Bulan decided to adopt one of the 3 known religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. According to a legend mentioned in a fictional book entitled The Dictionary of the Khazars, by the Serbian writer, Milorad Puvic, the king of the Khazars invited the scholars of those 3 religions and asked them to debate in front of him, and he promised to follow the religion of the winner. In that way, King Bulan picked up Judaism and converted his entire subjects to the religion of his choice. Milorad Puvic stated that in his novel, the Khazars symbolized the Serbs. This legend is mentioned in that book as a mockery to the author's people, the Serbs, but the entire accounts, of course, are meant as anti-Semitic propaganda against the Jews. Many Muslim religious scholars preach that legend from the pulpits at their mosques and teach it in their schools and colleges as if it is a historical fact. African Americans popularized and pushed further afield than Muslims. Some African Americans added a few things to it. They claim that those converted Khazars were run out of their empire when the Mongol leadership of Genghis Khan invaded it and forced them to flee to Europe. In Europe, they became Jews and Gypsies. Then they were heavily persecuted by the European Christians, which reached its ugliest form at the Nazi Holocaust. After the Second World War, they immigrated to the homeland of the Jews and settled in Palestine, today Israel. Of course, this theory contradicts the well-documented history of the Jews in the diaspora, which is recorded in all the annals of the kings and rulers of Western European kingdoms, including the records of the popes of the Roman Catholic Church, Eastern Orthodox Church, Coptic Church, Syrian Church, Russian Eastern Church, and Ethiopian Orthodox Church. Even in the annals of all emperors of the Byzantine Empire, which lasted from the year 320 until the year 1453 AD. Also, the annals of all European kings and kingdoms documented the history of the persecuted Jews in every European city and village. No other group of people has their history so well documented as the children of Israel. Even the New Testament mentioned the presence of the Jews all over the Roman Empire. Mark Twain once said, "All things are mortal except the Jew." Frederick the Great of Russia asked his court chaplain to prove the inerrancy of the Bible. He said, "One word, sir, Israel." This conspiracy theory about African Americans has many holes and is built on layers of false assumptions and speculations. The first question revolves around how the Hamitic black Africans mysteriously became the Semitic Hebrew Jews. The adherents of this theory invariably claim that the ancient Israelis were black. Due to the heavy persecution they faced from other nations, they fled to Africa and hid there until the Muslims invaded them and took them as war captives. Then they sold them as slaves to the European settlers who took them to the New World. After centuries of enslavement, their descendants were told by their masters that they were Africans and hence made to believe that their original homeland was Africa. According to them, this lie was believed by the entire world until recently through archaeology some of them had come to know that they were the chosen people of God, and the Jews of Israel had stolen their identity. If you tell them that the Jews and Arabs are cousins through Ishmael and Isaac, the two sons of Abraham, and today the Arabs of the Middle East look like the Jews rather than the black African Americans, they will tell you that the Arabs of the Middle East also are fake people who have stolen other people's identities. They are instead from Persia, today Iran, who originally emigrated from the European region which today is called Georgia. According to them, even the Egyptians today are not the true Kemites, the ancient Egyptians, or were known as pharaohs. Likewise, they are Asian invaders who conquered Egypt and forced the ancient Egyptians to flee to Sudan and live there. The first African American to invent this fabricated theory was a false Muslim prophet called Elijah Muhammad. He claimed that his God Allah had revealed to him that the Jews who are living in Palestine today are not the true Hebrew Israelis whom Moses had brought out of Egypt and had led to the promised land, the land of Canaan, Israel today. According to his prophecy, the true Hebrew Israelis are the black African people who were brought as slaves during the transatlantic slavery trade between the 16th and the 19th centuries, the descendants of the 12 tribes of Israel. This prophecy was popularized by Louis Farrakhan. Elijah Muhammad and Louis Farrakhan are responsible for the assassination of Malcolm X, also known as El-Hajj Malik el-Shabazz. Malcolm X was assassinated when he broke up with the Nation of Islam and exposed its spiritual leader, Elijah Muhammad, as a hypocrite who fathered 8 children out of wedlock with 6 of his female teenage employees. Under the instigation of the false prophet Elijah Muhammad, Louis Farrakhan delivered a condemning speech in which he declared Malcolm X as a traitor and an apostate who deserved to be killed. Shortly after that, 3 assassins from the Nation of Islam stormed the crowded hall where Malcolm X was delivering a speech before a huge crowd shot 15 bullets at point-blank range at him and assassinated him on the 21st of February 1965. I felt it is expedient to include this information here. The false prophecy began with the Muslims and was soon adopted by the majority of the other African Americans, including the Christians. Many former African American Christians claimed that the Lord had revealed that truth to them through divine inspiration and the Holy Spirit's illumination. Every African American Christian accepted this false conspiracy theory, forsook Christianity, and adopted that black Hebrew Israelis cult. They can quote hundreds of Old Testament and New Testament verses to prove their claim. They also quote freely from all the apocryphal books. They even employ some pseudo-apocryphal books such as the Book of Jasher and the Book of Enoch. When the theorists developed critical conspiracy theory, it developed into a huge conspiracy theory. Some had even allotted each black group to its corresponding Israelite tribe component. The school of thought attributes the Negroes, African Americans, of the USA to the tribe of Judah, the Puerto Ricans to the Ephraim, the Cubans to the Manasseh, the West Indians, Jamaica to Belize as descendants of the tribe of Benjamin, the Mexicans to the Issachar, the Haitians to the priestly tribe of Levi, the Hawaiians, Samoans to the Naphtali, Seminole Indians and Australian Aborigines to the Reuben, Panamanians and Colombians to the Zebulun, Brazilians and Argentinians to the Asher, Dominicans to the tribe of Simeon, and lastly the North American Indians to the tribe of Gad. No one can fail to notice that some of those 12 tribes such as the Native Americans, Australian Aborigines, and the Mexicans are not originally descendants of the African slaves who were brought to the New World through the transatlantic slave trade from the 16th century to the 19th century. Neither the so-called prophecy of Elijah Muhammad of the Nation of Islam nor the supposedly received through divine inspiration or illumination by some of the so-called black Hebrew Israelis of America can solve this riddle. The only common factor between the Africans, the Native Americans, and the Aboriginals of Australia was that they were all subjected to an evil and harsh slavery system by the European settlers. After over 1 million Mexicans were enslaved and killed, the Spanish conquistadors and colonists, under the advice of the Dominican friar Bartolomé de las Casas, replaced the natives with African slaves. Bartolomé de las Casas tried to save the natives and relieve them from the evil institution of slavery. He suggested that instead of enslaving the Mexicans, Spain should induct African slaves. He believed that the enslavement of the Africans was morally and religiously justifiable because they were captured in just wars between the tribes. Based on this satanic idea, African slaves were either bought from their Arab masters or captured from their villages and shipped to the New World in hundreds and thousands until their numbers reached millions. Many people think that many of the African slaves were brought to the United States of America. That is an erroneous belief. 95% were brought to other European colonies in the two Americas and their islands. Only 5% ended in the USA. We are told that Bartolomé de las Casas later regretted his decision to switch to Africa when he saw the evil way African slaves were treated and killed too. But he understood that it was too late to undo the evil he had created. The settlers discovered that the natives were weak and lazy while the Africans were strong and worked harder. To solve the mystery of including the Native Americans in that chart, we must go beyond the two false prophecies and uncover the first true conspirator who invented that strange chart of the so-called newly discovered 12 lost tribes of Israel. Surprisingly, the chart owes its origin to a white author. He was one of the so-called white devils, the white Europeans, who stole the Africans from their black continent and brought them as slaves to the Americas. He was known as Ludwig B. Larson. He included it in his work, The Little Book, Key to the Bible and Heavens. The Mystery of the Ages Revealed, which was first published in 1939. He described the locations of those 12 tribes on pages 170 to 179. He depended on astrology and heavily borrowed from the Book of the Mormons by Joseph Smith. The Mormons believe that black Africans have no souls and hence cannot be saved by Christ. Ludwig B. Larson was believed to be a 33rd degree Freemason Illuminati and based his writings on the New World Order. We will not go into the conspiracy theory of the secret societies of the Freemasonry and Illuminati. Suffice it to say that Ludwig B. Larson was not a biblical scholar, notable historian, or writer. No one can ignore the great sufferings and the inexcusable abuses that Africans suffered at the hands of slavers in the New World. I strongly condemn such inhumane treatment of human beings by their fellow men. But an evil done in the past cannot be undone by creating a false theory to justify the victim's misfortune or fate in life. Not all descendants of the former African slaves agree with this conspiracy theory. But all of them look at Africa as a lowly place whose inhabitants have no share in any ancient civilizations or made many notable contributions in the past. They argue that Africans have no religion or heritage. Understandably, they disassociate themselves from a heritage of ignominy. Some of them, such as the Jamaicans, invented a different theory to avoid being labeled as the descendants of backward Africans. For that reason, the Jamaicans created a religious cult known as Rastafarianism, which upholds their claim of being descendants of the Ethiopian kingdom of Aksum, making the former Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie their deity and worshipping him as the Almighty God who was the real incarnation of God the Father. The late reggae superstar, Bob Marley, popularized that cult through his lovely music and songs. Interviewer: can you tell the people what it means to be a Rastafarian? Bob Marley: I would say to the people, be still, and know that His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia is the Almighty God. Now the Bible says so, Babylon newspaper says so, and I and the children say so. You know. So I don't see how much more reveal our people want. What they want is a white God. Well, God comes black. True, true. Yet, a third group that does not have many followers is African Americans who claim to be direct descendants of the ancient Egyptians known as the ancient Kemites. They believe that their Egyptian ancestors are the pharaohs who built the pyramids. They refuse to attach themselves to the followers of Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. They are like the ancient Kemites who used to be polytheists and animists. They worship nature, spirits, and all gods of Egypt. They also claim that the Egyptians today are simply Arabs and have nothing to do with their ancient ancestors. Their ancestors were invaded and defeated by the Arab Muslims who drove them out of their country and occupied it. At present, their Kemitic ancestors live in North Sudan. Some of their numbers claim that God is a black woman. Alex Haley, in his masterpiece, the novel Roots 1976, went to Africa in search of his roots. He spent years tracing his family history and decided it went back to a single African man, Kunta Kinte, who was captured in the Gambia and taken to America as a slave man around 1767. In one village, he heard the native Africans speaking about that man Kunta Kinte, who went to bring wood and was captured and taken away as a slave by some foreigners. So in that way, Alex Haley discovered his roots and divined the truth about the origins of his great African ancestors. He did not try to go beyond that and forge a pseudo-heritage of pride and significance. If we ignore all the obvious facts and for the sake of argument let us assume that African Americans are the true Hebrew Israelis. Where is their Torah, and what happened to the other books of the Old Testament? At the time of Jesus, the Jews were very committed to their religious beliefs and advocated the utmost care of their Holy Scripture. They were civilized and had spoken and written Hebrew. 1/3 of the population of Alexandria city were Jews. 200 years before the first coming of Christ, the Jews of Alexandria had translated the entire Old Testament into Greek, the Septuagint. It is so named because was translated by 70 Jewish scholars. The greatest philosopher at that time was a Jew by the name of Philo. If we look at Africa before the Arab Muslims' invasions and enslavement in the 7th century AD, we find nothing worth mentioning. No written history of any civilized group. No notable heritage or unifying religion. They were deeply involved in black magic and the worship of evil spirits. Most of them were animists and worshipped the spirits of their ancestors. The continent itself was a nameless mass of huge land until Leo Africanus, 1488 to 1554, lent it his last name in the 16th century AD. However, today Arab Tunisians reject this theory and claim that their ancient ancestors, the Berber tribes, known as the Carthaginians who dwelt in North Africa, were the first people to refer to the black inhabitants of the rest of Africa as Ifrans, which means cave dwellers. Many people today believe that North Africa's inhabitants who have white and lighter skin such as the Egyptians, Libyans, Tunisians, Algerians, and Moroccans are Arabs and not Africans. They distinguish them from other Africans as if the two races are living on two different continents. Some people go further than that to submit that North Africa is part of Arabia or Europe. If you say to an Egyptian, Libyan, Tunisian, Algerian, or Moroccan that you are an African, he will consider it as an insult. He will respond angrily and say to you, I am an Arab and not a Zanji. In the Arabic language, a Zanji is a black slave from the Sultanate of Zanzibar in today's Kenya. Arabs refer to all black people in Africa, other countries, and black Americans as Zanuj. Even pure black Africans like the Mauritanians and northern Sudanese claim to be Arabs and hate to be described as Zanuj or Africans. So, the word Zanji in the Arab nation became equivalent to the word black Negro in the USA. When the Africans were invaded and enslaved by the Arab Muslims and other Europeans, they were very backward and engaged in constant warfare between the many tribes. To this day, some go around naked and dwell in primitive huts. Very few of them were able to form a nation or a kingdom. The most notable were the Aksum Kingdom in Ethiopia and the kingdoms of Egypt. Most of the African tribes do not have a written history. This sad fact is the reason that led many African Americans to deny and despise their African origins or roots and create alternate theories that lend them credence. They placed themselves as the chosen Hebrew Israelis and considered the true Jews as identity thieves. The dangerous part of this theory is the claim that Christ did not die for the sins of the entire world. He died for their sins alone. He did not come to save anyone else except them, and when he returns, he will save them again from other nations that had enslaved and ill-treated them. He will make them kings and priests to rule all other nations. Some African Americans have left Christianity and came up with a new cult called IUIC, Israel United in Christ. They accept the Old and New Testaments. They revive all the apocryphal books. But their interpretation of the Holy Bible justifies the false doctrine of their new cult. Some of them harbor indescribable hatred towards the Jews of Israel and call them the serpent people and Satan worshippers. They are highly racial and anti-Semitic. They also hate the white man and consider him to be the source of all their past and present ills and miseries. Many of them believe that there is an ongoing secret plot to destroy them through poisoning their environment, sterilization, and killing them through the American police. They also believe that for many years the government of America secretly applied various eugenic tactics to get rid of the black race. It should be no surprise that they also hate Christians and abhor their churches and pastors. For them, Christianity is a false religion created by the white people after stealing away the Bible of the black Hebrew Israelis. According to them, the Christian churches kept African Americans, for centuries, dumb and blind about their great religious heritage. The Christian churches are responsible for believing that the Jews are the true Hebrew Israelis, and for this reason, they are required to bless them and help the Jews establish themselves in their promised land, today Israel. By so doing, they can ensure the return of the Messiah. Nevertheless, the moment God opened their eyes to the truth, they came to know that they were the true descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who are the true people of the Abrahamic covenant, Genesis 12, verses 1-3, for whom Christ died on the cross and to whom he shall come back again to crown them kings and make all other nations of the world their servants and maidservants. Let us leave their strange conspiracy theory here, and we shall pick it up in a later chapter.